Hello friends, today we are going to do the chapter The Overcoat. In a certain department there was a certain official, not a very high one, it must be allowed, short of stature, somewhat pock-marked, red-haired and short-sighted, with a bald forehead, wrinkled cheeks and a complexion of the kind shown as sanguine. The St. Petersburg climate was responsible for this. As for his official status, he was what is called a perpetual titular councillor, over which, as is well known, some writers make merry and crack their jokes, obeying the praiseworthy custom of attacking those who cannot bite back. His name was Akaki Akakevich. When and how he entered the department and who appointed him, no one could remember. His superiors treated him in coolly despotic fashion. Some sub-chief would thrust a paper under his nose without so much as saying, "Copy," or "Here's a nice interesting affair," or anything else agreeable, as is customary amongst well-bred officials, and he took it looking only at the paper and not observing who handed it to him, or whether he had the right to do so, simply took it and set about copying it. The young officials laughed at and made fun of him, and strewed bits of paper over his head, calling them snow. But Akakevich answered not a word any more than if there had been no one there besides himself. It even had no effect upon his work. Amid all these annoyances, he never made a single mistake in a letter. But if the joking became wholly unbearable, as when they joked his hand and prevented his attending to his work, he would exclaim, "Leave me alone! Why do you insult me?" And there was something strange in the words and the voice in which they were uttered. It would be difficult to find another man who lived so entirely for his duties. It is not enough to say that Akaki labored with zeal. No, he labored with love. In his copying, he found a varied and agreeable employment. Outside his copying, it appeared that nothing existed for him. He gave no thought to his clothes. His undress uniform was not green, but a sort of rusty, muddy color. The collar was low, so that his neck, in spite of the fact that it was not long, seemed inordinately so, as it emerged from it, like the necks of those plaster kittens which wag their heads and are carried about upon the heads of scores of Russian foreigners. On reaching home, he sat down at once at the table, supped his cabbage soup up quickly. He rose from the table and copied papers which he had brought home. If there happened to be none, he took copies for himself, for his own gratification, especially if the document was not worthy not an account of its style, but of its being addressed to some distinguished person. Having written to his heart's content, he lay down to sleep, smiling at the thought of the coming day. of what God might send him to copy on the morrow. There exists in St. Petersburg a powerful foe of all who receive a salary of 400 rubles a year or thereabouts. This foe is no other than the northern cold, although it is said to be very healthy. At an hour where the foreheads of even those who occupy exalted positions ache with the cold, and tears start to their eyes, the poor titular councillors are sometimes quite unprotected. Their only salvation lies in traversing as quickly as possible in their thin little overcoats 5 or 6 streets, and then warming their feet in the potter's room, and so throwing all their talents and qualifications for official service, which had become frozen on the way. You must know that a KY is overcoat served as an object or ridicule to the officials. They even refused it the noble name of overcoat and called it a dressing jacket. Seeing how the matter stood, Akake decided that it would be necessary to take the overcoat to Petrovich, the tailor, who lived somewhere on the 4th floor up a dark staircase, and who, in spite of his having but one eye and pock marks all over his face, busied himself with considerable success in repairing the trousers and coats of officials and others. That is to say, when he was sober and not nursing some other scheme in his head. No, it is impossible to mend it. It's a wretched garment. You must have a new overcoat, said the tailor. At the word new, all grew dark before Akaki's eyes, and everything in the room began to whirl around. A new one, said he, as if still in a dream. Why, I have no money for that. Yes, a new one, said the Petrovich with barbarous composure. Well, if it came to a new one, how much would it cost? Well, you would have to lay out 150 or more, said Petrovich, and pursed up his lips significantly. 150 rubles for an overcoat? Shrieked poor Akaki, perhaps for the first time in his life, for his voice had always been distinguished for softness. Yes, said Petrovich. Petrovich, please do repair it somehow so that it will serve a little longer, said Akaki. No, it would only be a waste of time and money, said Petrovich, and Akaki went after these words utterly discouraged. Akaki was still for mending it, but Petrovich would not hear of it and said, I shall certainly have to make you a new one, and you may depend on it that I shall do my best. It may even be, as the fashion goes, that the collar can be fastened by silver hooks under a flap. Then Akaki saw that it was impossible to get along without a new overcoat, and his spirit sank utterly. But although he knew that Petrovich would undertake to make a cloak for 80 rubles, still, where was to go into his landlady's room and work by her light. When he went into the street, he must walk as lightly as he could and as cautiously upon the stones, almost upon tiptoe, in order not to wear his heels down in too short for a time. He must give the laundress as little to wash as possible, and in order not to wear out his clothes, he must take them off as soon as he got home and wear only his cotton dressing gown, which had been long and carefully saved. At least once every month he went to Petrovich to talk about the overcoat, where it would be best to buy the cloth, what color it should be, and what price. Another 2 or 3 months of partial fasting, and Akaki had actually saved up nearly 80 rubles. The very first day, he set off in company with Petrovich to the shop. They bought some very good clothes. Petrovich worked at the overcoat for 2 whole weeks, and for there was a great deal of quilting. Otherwise, it would have been finished sooner. He charged 12 rubles for the job. It could not possibly have been done for less. It was all sewed with silk in small double seams, and Petrovich went over each seam afterwards with his own teeth, stamping in various patterns. It is difficult to say precisely on what day, but probably the most glorious one in Akaki's life, when Petrovich at length brought home the overcoat. He brought it in the morning before the hour when it was necessary to start for the department. Never did an overcoat arrive so exactly in the nick of time, for the severe cold had set in and it seemed to threaten to increase. Petrovich brought the overcoat himself as befits a good tailor. On his countenance was a significant expression such as Akaki had never beheld there. He seemed fully sensible that he had done no small deed, and crossed a gulf separating tailors who only put in linings and execute repairs from those who make new things. Taking out the overcoat, he gazed proudly at it, held it up with both hands, and flung it skillfully over the shoulders of Akaki. Then he pulled it and fitted it down behind with his hand, and he dragged it around Akaki without buttoning it. Akaki, like an experienced man, wished to try the sleeves. Petrovich helped him on with them, and it turned out that the sleeves were satisfactory also. In short, the overcoat appeared to be perfect and most seasonable. He paid him, thanked him, and set out at once in his new cloak for the department. Petrovich followed him, and pausing in the street, gazed long at the overcoat in the distance. After which he went to one side expressly to run through a crooked alley and emerge again into the street beyond to gaze once more upon the overcoat from another point, namely directly in front. Friends, this interesting story is written by Nikolai Gogol. Thank you, friends. Bye bye.